Hey guys, Zane from the Infinite Jukebox here with another album review, and today I wanted to talk about the new Jeff Rosenstock record, HELLMODE. Jeff Rosenstock is the kind of guy to have rightfully preceding his name the words, the man, the myth, the legend. I mean, he kind of really does fit the bill. I mean, even besides being in some of the most beloved 21st century punk bands this side of alternative music, solo albums from him like We Cool and Worry have garnered this sort of cult fan base mixed with critical acclaim that doesn't seem to be going anywhere, as even some of his more recent records have gotten a lot of love both from his audience and from critics such as myself, if you can really call me a critic. Plus, the guy also soundtracked a Cartoon Network show. He's got that going for him, good for him. It's no secret that the average Jeff Rosenstock album rollout is equivalent to a national holiday in some circles, and honestly, it's not that hard to see why. I mean, generally speaking, HELLMODE is a record that summarizes everything that Rosenstock has done right over the course of his career, and considering it's been nearly 30 years since the formation of his first really noteworthy band, the Arrogant Sons of Bitches, I think it's kind of insane that he's still this need-to-know artist and figure within indie music, but here we are. He absolutely is, and HELLMODE is proof of that. Much of HELLMODE is just as energetic as anything else that Rosenstock has ever put out solo, and anything that he's ever been involved with as a band member. I mean, the record opens up with the track Will You Still You, and that's a super fun, upbeat, punchy power pop song, until it suddenly goes into this breakbeat-based breakdown of epic proportions, and really just stays in that lane for a good period of time, really just shooting a jolt of energy through the entirety of the record from the very start, and letting that help define the vast majority of the album from that point moving forward, even if that particular style isn't the only thing featured on the album itself. This is just filled with vibes, for lack of a better term. And in that moment that I just mentioned on Will You Still You, it basically sums up the entire album, at least the more energetic moments of the record, because the general tone of the vast majority of the more upbeat tracks on this album are Anxious Man and a bunch of his musician friends barely get through recording the entirety of an album before everything just begins to completely fall apart because they're recording in their garage at 2 in the afternoon. That could definitely be a negative quality, because ultimately it could result in some unnecessarily ramshackle performances, and that's somewhat of a common occurrence across a lot of energetic music in general, especially within the realms of indie rock, indie alt-rock, punk, a lot of genres that are known for specifically staying within the realms of raw performance work. And you know what? That could have totally been something that impacted this album specifically negatively, but it doesn't in the end, because it's still grounded in this extremely solid sense of melody. Look, there may not be anything quite career-defining here, nothing like, say, the Worry song, We Beg to Explode, again, really just career-defining track. I think the closest that you probably get to that is maybe Future's Dumb or Liked You Better, both amazing songs and major highlights on HELLMODE, but generally speaking, the entire track list here is incredibly solid no matter what. There is not a single beat missed. And a lot of the credit for a lot of the tone of this album should be given to the backing band that supports Jeff throughout the vast majority of this record. For example, Kevin Higuchi really brings some intense drum work to the table, and a lot of the moments here that are defined by the most powerful, energetically striking moments on the entire album, for example, that blast beat moment on Will You Still You, they are defined by the drum work, and that is Kevin Higuchi's presence. There's also John DeDominici, who's constantly bringing these really tight, strong bass lines to the table. I mean, the guy isn't going off Matt Freeman style or anything like that, but that's just because it's not necessary for a Jeff Rosenstock album. What he does here is deliver a handful of incredibly solid bass lines that really add a great low end to songs that honestly really do need some sort of anchor to work as well as they do, and his work on bass just really makes everything click. Look, I would be hesitant to just generally call Jeff Rosenstock's discography up to this point straight power pop, but at the same time, Jeff has always been an artist with some majorly power pop leanings to the more upbeat moments of classic power pop bands like Big Star or The Undertones, for example. And I think that here he leans into that and it benefits him greatly. All of these really powerful choruses and all of these perfect, catchy chord progressions, even in moments where maybe things aren't intended to really stick in your head, they still do. My point is that no matter what, no matter whether you consider this a weaker album by Rosenstock standards or his best album, the best thing that the man's ever been involved with, no matter what, he's still embracing one of the best qualities about himself, and in my eyes, that's a great thing. Similar to the instrumentation found throughout, a lot of the songwriting that is found on HELLMODE is beautifully representative of what a lot of Jeff Rosenstock's work up to this point has been all about. And again, it's not totally mind-blowing, but it's, again, an imperfect capsulization of what Rosenstock does. It's kind of great because of that. The very uneasy, anxious songwriting of tracks like Life Admin, for example, have these sort of self-loathing narratives that are pretty depressing when you actually get down into the literal meaning of a lot of the lyrics, taking things away from the instrumentation. Yet at the same time, they have enough self-awareness, enough humor, enough lightheartedness, and at times, even weirdly, enough self-empowerment to not feel overly self-indulgent or self-pitying to an obnoxious extent, which would have honestly dragged the album down immensely. And I'm not necessarily saying that past Jeff Rosenstock records have seen him be self-indulgent in terms of the lyrical department. All I am saying is that he consistently does so, and as such, he consistently walks a very thin line between managing to come across as thoughtful and intelligent and self-aware and extremely whiny and pretentious. And admittedly, there are times where he lands somewhere in the middle or perhaps even somewhere in the latter field. And no matter what, that is bound to happen, considering a lot of the songs here are about how much Jeff hates himself, or hates someone else, or doesn't like the world, or how frustrated he is with something, or even about his own real existence, or something like that. But at the same time, I really do feel like more often than not, perhaps even more consistently so than any other solo Rosenstock record up to this point, Jeff comes across as a very normal, understandable, and even relatable person. I mean, really, Jeff Rosenstock's musical persona may hate everything about himself in particular, but at the same time, there's this sort of intoxicating relatability about a lot of what he's saying on the album, making it general enough that it's relatable for a wide audience of people, but specific enough to be about himself. That's both admirable just from a technical sense as a songwriter, but also just very impressive in terms of emotional ability. The dude really sells what he's saying. The opening lines of the track Soft Living especially manage to capture the main themes of a lot of this record, and a lot of Jeff's work in the first place, if I'm being totally honest. There's this simplistic, emotional brutality about the words, "When you think of me, do you see something inside me that I could never see?" And it is in that coldness, in that brutality, that it just so plainly depicts a lack of self-worth that is both striking from the perspective of what Jeff is saying about himself and how he views his own self, whether that be in terms of the real him or merely just a creative persona, but it's also impressive in terms of how relatable it can be just for the average everyday person. And that's what I'm referring to when I say I'm impressed by the technical ability of Rosenstock's songwriting. He is capable to simultaneously make songs that are deeply personal in the way that they're written, but still understandable and easily connectable for every person that's not Jeff Rosenstock. I mean, for example, everyone struggled with self-image or self-worth at some point, and that is perfectly touched on here. Similar things could honestly be said about the follow-up track HELLMODE as well, an acoustic stripped-down kind of number that is not only written extremely well, but it's also kind of a nice break from the more electric and energetic and punkish points of the record. Meanwhile, the raw, emotional content of the lyrics is perfectly translated into raw and loose musical moments here, tracks like Head and tracks like I Wanna Be Wrong, for example. Overall, I just think that anyone who goes into this expecting some sort of deep dive into romanticist poetry or some beautiful touching thoughts on mortality or anything like that are going in for the wrong thing. In the end, HELLMODE is a violently human record, and as such, that is appropriately reflected in the lyrics. It's not perfect or mind-blowing by any means in terms of actual songwriting, but at the same time, it's powerful in just how simple it is. It's a 2D record that's also kind of 3D in the same way. What I mean by that is that upon first glance, a lot of the songwriting found here, and arguably even on other Jeff Rosenstock solo albums, is that found on this record is a lot of stuff that just initially, it appears to be a bit self-indulgent, and I don't think that many people would necessarily disagree with me when I say a quick glance at his lyrics seems to come across as just pure frustration for frustration's sake. But once you actually spend some more time with Jeff's body of work, particularly albums like HELLMODE, you become more and more experienced with these deeper themes of frustration and anxiety and desperation to have a higher understanding of self and a higher understanding of things around you that are causing those aforementioned frustrations and anxieties. Jeff Rosenstock doesn't seem like he's a particularly deep dude upon first glance, and you could probably make the argument that he's not, but really, HELLMODE seems to kind of imply the former. Of course, the HELLMODE is not without its flaws, shall we say. For example, one could make pretty accurate commentary that Jeff Rosenstock's style hasn't really changed from album to album over the course of his solo career, and that he's been riding a pretty singular sound since he first started going under his own name. I mean, sure, each album has some darker than expected moments, or maybe some moments that are more lighthearted and more silly than your average Jeff Rosenstock track, but at the same time, I also don't really think that there's a great counter-argument to say that HELLMODE is that different from a record like, say, 2020's No Dream. I mean, sure, HELLMODE does have some noticeably smoother production, that's without a doubt, but that's not really the point I'm trying to make here. It's because in the end, HELLMODE isn't meant to be some sort of evaluation of artistic growth and change. In the end, it comes across more like an amplification of perfectionistic tendencies, and that is exactly what's found on this record. HELLMODE is all about the classic Jeff Rosenstock sound being boiled down into a single album, no fat attached, no strings attached, and you know what? That's what the man delivers. Exactly what he delivers, in fact. Plus, that doesn't necessarily mean that every single song here is the exact same. I mentioned the previously established track HELLMODE, a more acoustic and stripped down track, but there's also some chant-along kind of moments that pair nicely with some of the more noisy passages. I feel like they add a good sense of differentiation and really do keep things from coming across as formulaic. I'm just saying, Jeff Rosenstock doesn't need to make Zydeco or Darkwave or some completely unrelated niche genre to be good. The man has a knack for really good power pop indie rock. He knows it, and you know what? He utilizes it to the best of his abilities, and it always results in a damn good time, and that's what happens here. If you happen to be a Jeff Rosenstock fan, then chances are you're going to find HELLMODE anything but unique, but at the same time, better off for it. And as stated, this isn't some sort of major creative left turn for Jeff where he's just suddenly a prog musician now and he's doing technical death metal with melodic avant-garde jazz passages or whatever. It's Jeff Rosenstock through and through. There is absolutely no denying that, because in the end he's a man with a wild amount of talent for creating really noisy indie pop rock with some punk influences, and again, that is exactly what he delivers here. The instrumentals are fun, the songwriting is tragically relatable in some of its best moments, and the energy is nearly palpable. I'm very impressed with all of these different qualities of the record, even if they don't necessarily come together at a constant rate to be one of my favorite albums of the year so far. Those wanting things to switch up from Jeff's previous studio albums will likely walk away from HELLMODE disappointed, and hey, you know what, that's a completely valid stance to take. I feel that way about many other artists. It just happens that Jeff Rosenstock is not one of them. And I also will say that for those who kind of know what they're walking into here, simply just another Jeff Rosenstock album, will surely walk out pleased. I would hope so, at least, because if you don't like this, then chances are you're probably not a huge fan of other Jeff records, but then again, who knows. I'm going to give this record 3.5 stars out of 5. And with that being said, that is the end of this album review. I've been Zane from the Infinite Jukebox. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.